Welcome, Smyth Performance New Beetle Ute Builders. This video is on my technique for extending the rear window surround when needed to fix the gap to the back of the door. If you're lucky, when you put the rear window surround on, these wings, these side panels are a little bit long, and you can swing the door gently, closed on them, scribe the line where you want it, and cut it, and you get that gap just right. But more often than not, they come out a little bit short. Now, there are a bunch of things that drive this that you may not run into this issue, and if you don't, fantastic. Cut them to the right length and go with that. I like to make this flush into the step side here, which means I'm bringing the bottom of the rear window surround back a little bit. I have built them with a step here, which is fine. It's a different look, depends what you're going for. But on this one, I'm making it flush, and I have run into this issue several times. So you can see this white fill, this white color here. It's about 3/4 of an inch short at the bottom, and at the top, yeah, it was just a hair short. And I love having nice door gaps. So I've got to fill that somehow, make it nice and level to this, and nice and parallel to the door edge. So here's my technique. I build a form using paint sticks, and I'm a fan of the paint sticks because they're pretty consistent 3/16, which is about the industry standard for door gaps. I wrap it in foil tape, like what you use on ductwork, just to keep whatever filler I'm using from adhering to it. Use the door to hold that. It'll take a couple of paint sticks, and there are plenty other materials that you could use, but you want something that the thickness of it is going to give you that door gap that you want. So I wrap it in foil. I've already taped this off, and I have taped inside the jamb here so I don't get filler or adhesives into the door jamb where I don't want it. Close your door. Fit these in. Now, they're not going to stay exactly where you want. They're going to want to make a little bit of an angle. So what I often find myself doing is taking a little piece of tape and running it on this front edge and going forward just to hold it in place. It doesn't have to be super durable, but as you're packing filler in there, you want that mold to stay right where you want it, so you get it nice and even, and that will make less sanding later when you're trying to match everything up. So the door's closed, my mold is in place, I mix up my filler, and we'll talk about what materials I use for filler here in a little bit. And I pack that gap full. I like to use a putty knife. You can use a body filler spreader, or you could use another paint stick, whatever you like. But when I'm all done packing it, and I pack it pretty good, I come down and knife it off, and I like that nice sharp edge, so I don't leave a lot of extra material that later I'm gonna have to go sand off. So pick your tool by what you wanna work. Using a narrow putty knife takes you a little longer as you're packing, whereas if you're using a wider knife, you're packing a bigger chunk of it each time. Knife it off and let it cure. Then when you're done, after it's cured, when you pull your tape off here, open your door, and depending on the material you used, you just basically you knock that forward and it'll pop right off. So you can see now I have the basis of my fill done, and it's already really close to a nice perfect gap matching the bottom, and it's even from top to bottom against the door. Now the next question is, what do I use to fill? I caution you against using body filler like Bondo type. Even if you're using a high quality one, it's just not designed to be in that kind of volume. And you can see I have a fair amount of volume here. You could use tiger hair or something like that. I'm still not a fan of that in a high volume it tends to shrink a little bit and it cracks, and then you got to go back, or it even will flake off. I've mentioned in other videos I'm a big fan of cab-o-sil, and everybody asks me, what the hell is cab-o-sil? It's not a material that's used a lot. It's not used in the car industry, but basically it's a powdery additive to epoxy-based fiberglass resin. So you add it to get the exact consistency you want, and I find that kind of a peanut butter paste consistency is the easiest to work with. Obviously you don't want it to sag, so it has to hold its shape. It's got to be a little bit firm. Cab-o-sil is mostly fumed silica, so you could use fumed silica also. They're almost the same thing. This just has a few other things added into it. I believe it's glass bubbles and a couple other little things. Now the difficulties with this stuff is, as I mentioned, it's really hard to sand, and you got to be careful whenever you put it against fiberglass, because the fiberglass will sand faster than this does. So it's really hard to make a nice feathered edge. And that's exactly what we need to do here. So as I often mention, I go for about a 90% fill. So this isn't perfect, but it's pretty close. Now that I've got it at about 90%, I'll use my angle grinder with a 60 or 80 grit, and I'll get it really close now. I can just take it down. Maybe there's a little bit of a high spot in there somewhere if you had a seam in your form, right? Get it pretty close. You need the form, you don't need the exact fill, because then I'm gonna come back with body filler and I'll just smear it in both inside the jam and on the outside, and now I can feather that very, very cleanly and very nicely so that under the primer you won't see that edge. Like I said, there are other materials that you can use to do this. Working with cab-o-sil can be tough, but I trust its adhesion. If its surface is prepped right, and it should be scuffed up with a 60 or 80 before you apply it. Has to be clean, obviously. You don't want any dust or grease or wax in there, but this stuff adheres very well. It's a tiny bit flexible cured, which is good, because if the car flexes a little bit, you don't want that whole piece flexing and breaking out. And it will expand and contract at the same rate as the fiberglass, because it's basically fiberglass resin, which is good, because as this expands and contracts, it's going to be the same rate as that. So again, it won't crack off. So that's why I like to work with cab-o-sil, even though it's a little bit harder to sand, and it can be a real pain in the butt up in this little inside corner here, down in this corner here. But I find that it's worth it to never have to worry about, is that going to be durable? And just a light skim coat on top of it with some body filler, and you can make it look really pretty. So that's my technique for getting this door gap nice, especially when that wing comes out really short. There are plenty of other techniques. Kind of depends on what materials you're comfortable working with. So I'll leave that up to you. But that's my technique. Hope it helps you. At a minimum, it'll give you an idea maybe for how you can address yours being short if you run into that. I would say about 80% of my builds, I've run into it being short. So it's gonna happen to 8 out of 10 of you. Please like and subscribe. I can always use the support. Good luck with your build. Take care.